Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen in Europe and Nigeria. Welcome to our webinar Doing Business in Nigeria, organized in the framework of the Enterprise Europe Network activities. My name is Eric Amaral Garcia. I'm a policy officer at the European Commission. I'm part of the Enterprise Europe Network team at DG Grow. Today I will be moderating and closing this 9th session of our EN Embracing Global Markets webinar series. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that this event is running in parallel on WebEx and web streamed on YouTube. The webinar is being recorded and we invite all participants to write down their questions in the WebEx or YouTube chat. These questions will be addressed at the end of the event during our Q&A session before the closings. So without further ado, I would like to welcome and leave the floor for the opening remarks to Spiros Kellidis. Spiros works at Argo SA in Greece and is the chairman of the agri-food working group within the Enterprise Europe Network. Welcome, Spiros.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to our today's online session, Doing Business in Nigeria, part of the Embracing Global Markets webinar series, which supports European SMEs and startups in expanding and innovating across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Our today's webinar is hosted by experts from the European Commission, the EU delegation to Nigeria, specialists from Commercium Africa Limited, and the Enterprise Europe Network EN. My name is Spiros Kellidis, and together with my colleague Jada Platania, we lead the agri-food sector group within the Enterprise Europe Network. Today, our focus is on Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation with over 220 million people. Nigeria boasts a dynamic economy, the largest on the continent, enriched by vibrant culture and diverse geography that spans from arid savannas to lush rainforests, all centered around the vital Niger River. Nigeria's energy sector is vital due to its rich oil and natural gas resources, but faces challenges in the development of renewable energy. The digital sector is rapidly growing, driven by a young population and emerging tech hubs. The health sector is evolving with ongoing efforts to improve healthcare infrastructure, access and quality, balancing traditional practices with modern healthcare services. At the heart of Nigeria's economy, the agri-food sector employs over 70% of the workforce and is crucial for GDP, encompassing the production of cereals, staple tubers, and cash crops, as well as livestock farming and fisheries. Despite facing a number of challenges with limited access to finance, this sector holds immense potential for growth through modernization and value addition. The Enterprise Europe Network, established by the European Commission, plays a crucial role. It can assist Nigerian SMEs in connecting with European markets and fostering international growth and innovation. It provides targeted support, facilitating commercial and technological partnerships, offering valuable market intelligence and guiding compliance with EU standards. It organizes B2B matchmaking events, trade missions, and thematic workshops. Within the EN, the sector group agri-food, with its more than 100 members from 28 countries worldwide, focuses on agri-food businesses to access new markets and innovate internationally. Today's webinar will delve into Nigeria's business climate, exploring opportunities in the above-mentioned sectors, and feature insights from EU businesses thriving in Nigeria. This involvement of the Enterprise Europe Network, together with its sector groups, is vital in empowering Nigerian SMEs to navigate local challenges and succeed internationally, as well as for the EU SMEs to explore and collaborate with business in the Nigerian markets. Eric, having said that, the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spiros. So we can start with our first speaker from the EU delegation. Welcome, Richard Nordeman. He's the head of trade and economic section of the EU delegation to Nigeria, and he will share with us insights and challenges of the Nigeria business climate. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Eric. Waiting for my computer to respond. If you can let me know when you see my screen. Okay, I think you see my screen now.
Now, yes.
Good, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Ricard Nordeman. I'm the person sent out by DD Trade to Nigeria to try to improve trade and investment relations between the EU and Nigeria. So I'm heading up our small trade and economic section here in Abuja. I'm going to speak a little bit about the business climate, but then my eminent friend Tessa will also touch on some of the same issues later on in the presentation. Just to start off, maybe just a caveat to say that when we talk about business environment, we have a tendency to focus on what doesn't work. And I would do the same in my presentation. It doesn't mean that there's a lot of things that do work, but since we are looking to address issues and facilitate trade, we tend to focus on the problems and not what's already working well. I just want to say that in the beginning so you don't come away from my presentation thinking that everything is negative. It's just that I like to focus on the negative things that we can still improve so that you're all aware before you're launching yourself into any endeavors here in Nigeria. First, I just wanted to briefly touch on the context. As already mentioned by Spiros, Nigeria is colloquially called the giant of Africa. Part of it is because it is the largest economy in the continent and it has the most populous population. Just a caveat here also as well, because of the exchange rate fluctuations and since the Nigerian currency has lost a lot of value, we're expecting this to be changed this year. So probably by the end of the year, Nigeria will be the fourth largest economy in the continent because GDP denominated in dollars will have decreased because of the Naira losing value towards the dollars. But it's still, I mean, it's somewhat of an accounting exercise. It doesn't mean that Nigeria is not the future, but it's just a word of caution in case you see this and you wonder what's happening in Nigeria. As already mentioned, we have abundant natural resources. Historically, oil and gas has been the engine of the economy, and there's also a lot of mineral deposits that are largely untapped, including critical raw materials such as lithium. It has potential to be the breadbasket of Africa. It's very fertile land. Not only the Niger River, we have the Benue River, which also facilitates access to water and inland transportation. And as already mentioned, it's a very young population. The median age is only 17. And for a lot of foreign investors, they come here partly because Nigeria is a hub for the wider West African region. A lot of companies, they will install, for example, in Lagos, and then they will serve neighboring markets such as Togo, Benin, Ghana from Nigeria. But also because we have quite a substantial amount of potential consumers internally. I don't know exactly what the population is. I think we said earlier 230 million, somewhere like that. We haven't done a census in 2006, so we're not exactly sure, but around more than 200 at least, I think it's safe to say. The economy is not, as many people think, predominantly based on oil and gas anymore. The majority of GDP comes from the service economy. About a third comes from agriculture, and about 18% is from industry or manufacturing. Oil is only about 5.5%, almost 6% of GDP, but it's a very important source for access to foreign revenue. So over 90% of all access to dollars and euros come from selling oil. And we have gone through somewhat of economic hardship lately. Last year, growth didn't even manage to make 3%. I think it's 2.9, still to be confirmed. And the projection this year is about 3.3. We have also seen that quite a lot of increase in public debt, especially during the previous administration. It's still below the self-imposed threshold of 40%, and it's still much lower than many European countries. But it's more the problem of that a lot of internally generated revenue from taxes are used to servicing existing debt. So it also creates less policy space for public investments, why there's a need to look to the private sector, but also to bring capital and know-how into Nigeria. And just by way of exemplifying that, I just mentioned the previous administration's National Development Plan, which officially is still in place. We're basically looking for over 90% of Nigeria's investment needs to come from the private sector, or a lot of them from foreign investors. So it's about 190 billion is the current needs. And just by way of comparison, last year, I think we didn't even get $4 billion in inward FDI. So there is a screaming need for foreign investors to come to Nigeria. We had election last year, and the president has now been in power for about 12 months. Of the landmark reforms of President Tinubu's administration is especially two reforms that have gathered a lot of attention, and is that he unified the exchange rates. So before you had an official exchange rate and a black market rate, but now we have a unified exchange rate with the effect that the Naira has lost almost 2/3 of its value in the last year towards dollar and euro. And the other issue that he did, he's promised to remove the fuel subsidy. So you actually pay less at the pump here than you normally would because it's subsidized. And it was removed, but then it was kind of introduced again. So it's still a subsidy in place. Everybody kind of agreed to that, but it's at a higher price point than before. But that's also something that has contributed to inflation, which continues to be a problem. This is at the moment, if you ask Nigerian, they would say that we're going through an economic crisis or there's increasing hardship at the moment. If we then turn to the more horizontal issues of the business climate, one of the main problems in Nigeria for any type of economic activity is insecurity. You might be aware that there has been long-standing insurgencies in the northeast and the southeast. There's also a problem with banditry in the northwest, but also across the territory, there's increasing insecurity, preventing farmers from cultivating land, which is then adding to the cost of food, which is then causing food inflation. So that's, I think, the most generic or horizontal problem that most people will point out. And of course, it also applies to shipping lanes outside of Nigeria, where there is a long-standing also EU presence of navies to try to address piracy issues. The other issues historically that's been the main problem has been the access to foreign exchange. Before the unification of the rate, there was a scarcity. So basically, even if you sold your products in Nigeria, you would then need your commercial bank to go to CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, to ask them for a credit line to get foreign currency, which was not necessarily the case because there was a scarcity of foreign exchange. So some companies were not able to get foreign exchange and then repatriate their revenue. This has been especially the problem for the airline industry. I think by the mid of last year, to the tune of 850 million euros were trapped here by international airlines. But here we have seen a positive development. So the new government come in, the new central bank governor come in, and they decided to take away this parallel system. The result was that the Naira crashed, so it lost a lot of value, but a lot of inflow of foreign capital came. So we have this arrears has now been cleared, but on the other side, the problem is now volatility. I think if you look at currencies in the last 6 months globally, I think the Naira is one of the worst performing ones, and there's been a lot of volatility up and down in the exchange rate, which also meant that a lot of companies last year saw their profits wiped out because of they took a lot of foreign currency losses. Of course, we have somewhat of an issue here with that the unpredictability of the legal and financial framework. Taxation is not always sufficiently consulted on and publicized. A lot of companies have issues when it comes to getting any type of certification from public authorities, including work visas and work permits. And if you want to register a product or get some kind of conformity assessment, there's a number of costs associated with that, which are creating a barrier for foreign investors. The infrastructure overall is a problem, especially so for energy. I think the national grid has around 13 gigawatt installed in total, but you usually never get out more than 4 or 5 gigawatt actual output before it collapses. So if you're a company that are engaged in any type of energy intensive industry, or even if you say that you run a hotel, you will have to have your own energy source usually. Some people run it on generators, but in the long run, that's not feasible. So you will have to have your own source. And the same goes for infrastructure. When it comes to transport, where also there's a lot of issues about getting products from point of production to point of export. Overall, that's an issue. There is roads and rail projects going on, but they tend to usually be delayed and run over costs. For anyone that is focused more on the export-import side of business, you will have to deal with the situation afterwards. Doesn't really matter which, bless you, doesn't really matter which port you're using. There's a more horizontal issue of how these things are working. I think even if you use Tinkan or if you buy Papa, the different ports in Lagos, which is the main point of entry, at least 3 weeks of dwelling time, I think is the average. And also while you're there, you will need to hassle a lot with the custom authorities to discuss what kind of declarations you made. So that's a source of concern. Intellectual property counterfeiting is rampant. And then Nigeria is one of the priority countries for the European Commission when it comes to improving enforcement, which will need beefed up laws, but also more focus on the enforcement of existing laws. It's not only an issue when it comes to luxury products, but especially it's quite regularly you will see problems of counterfeit foodstuff, alcohol, but also pharmaceuticals that is in the end causing people's lives here. So that's an issue. Nigeria has a big and young and relatively well-educated population, but they might not always have the same skills as is demanded by the workforce, by the marketplace. So any kind of company that comes here will have to usually invest a lot in vocational training from the start. And once you have trained your staff, you will have an issue with immigration. Here they call it JAPA. So there is a problem of people starting to work for foreign investors, and then at some point they leave. And they don't necessarily leave because of problems of salary and issues like that, but it's more the things around, the quality of health and schooling, insecurity, things that you as an individual company might not be able to address. So it's more a societal level that has caused a lot of a wave of brain drain, I would say, in the last couple of years. And then finally, there is an issue of quality and standards infrastructure. So it's hard here to get the right certification systems. And even if you would say you have a business that is focused on imports and that you would produce in Europe and import here, there is quite a lot of fees linked to that. So let's say that you're exporting foodstuff from Europe. Even if you would need to get certified here, and the authority in charge will have to do a desk assessment, and they will charge you something like $10,000 only to do that assessment to give you the right to import. So in terms of red tape and bureaucracy, there is quite a lot of hoops to move around when it comes to anything that relates to SPS or anything that relates to conformity assessment requirements for machinery or manufactured products. That was it for me. That was maybe a bit too much negative, but I'm happy to answer to any question or bring some more nuance later on the Q&A session. And I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricard. Now I will give the floor to Tessa Bagu, who is a managing director at Commercium Africa Limited. She will present now the opportunities of the market and her experience as an entrepreneur herself in Nigeria. Please, Tessa.
Okay, I thought first the survey results, or you want to go first into doing business?
As you prefer.
Okay, well, perhaps connecting to what Ricard was saying, let me go to the doing business part. because some people may be completely afraid now. So let me then go to something a little bit more positive, perhaps. So my name is Tessa. I've been in Nigeria for 17 years, and I've been doing business for 15 of that. So I'm very pleased to be here. I hope you can see my screen because I just want to take you through some slides of doing business in Nigeria through the labyrinth that you can see here. Obviously, when people think of Nigeria, they think of things that like Ricard was mentioning, including like how difficult things are and all the things here on the slide. So people ask me, why Nigeria? When I moved to Nigeria, people literally ask me like, do you want to die? Why are you going to such a scary place? Of course, there is a lot more nuance than that. And one of the things I want you to consider, it is simply a huge country, but not just that. And Ricard alluded to that already. It is a diversified economy. There's a lot of companies that you can sell to. It's relatively import dependent. So there's a lot of trade opportunity. And perhaps because of the reputation, there is still limited international competition, even though the competition is quickly growing. The opportunities are everywhere. So Nigeria is not a mature economy. It is not as mature as South Africa, for example. It is very much in development, even though we're going through one of the worst economic crises in a very long time. But we do have a population that needs to eat and needs medication, and it's a huge population. We see a shift to more formalized businesses, including in QSRs, like the quick service restaurants, but also in supermarkets, etc. Because importation is more and more expensive with a very weak currency at the moment, you'll see that there's actually more production locally. Now that the Naira has lost value also against African countries, you see more manufacturing happening in Nigeria for export to other African countries. So it's essentially an opportunity that comes with a weaker currency. And one thing that I always like to point out, that there are many international or European companies that have a base in Nigeria. And I'll get back to that because there's also a survey done with or among the European companies that are based here. But they are your potential clients or your potential partners. So in that sense, there is a good starting point for whoever wants to do business with Nigeria. And there are very fast-growing sectors, sectors where there is opportunities to capitalize on some of the issues. Ricard mentioned that there is not enough electricity infrastructure. So what you see is that Nigeria is leapfrogging when it comes to solar energy, for example. Other really nice highlights are the ICT industry. So years ago, everything was imported, and now you have a sort of like a Silicon Valley here in Lagos, where I'm based. And you have that across many sectors where you see innovation, you see solution bringing companies finding their niche. And essentially every sector is still underdeveloped. So it's not so much if there is a market for you in Nigeria, but how to find the market and how to deal with that. But I wanted to address the elephant in the room first. This is a nice African elephant called corruption. And the amount of time that people ask me, how do you deal with corruption? You've been there for so long, like you must be, paying bribes left, right, and center. For one, I'd say corruption is a bit of a global phenomenon. In Europe, we tend to call it fraud or something else. But here, what happens there, here we call it, blatant corruption. But it's everywhere in your life on the one side, but in business, you can find strategies around it. I liked what Ricard mentioned, and I wrote it down: arbitrary application of custom rules. So rules are deliberately not very clear, because that opens a window to maneuver and to ask for facilitation charges. And those facilitation charges are then not, of course, not given to an institution or an entity, but they go to a person or some people in that entity, aka corruption. But a lot of that can be avoided with the people that you surround yourself with. Another example is that they came to lock up my office. They came on the last day of September. I got a call from the gate and they said like, Madame, the tax authority is here. and they're coming to lock up your business. And I was like, why the hell that? I'm compliant, as a crazy person as I can be. And they said like, well, you haven't been paying the taxes on your staff salaries. Now, I changed company name. So I put all the staff from one company to the next entity. I have all the paperwork there. I have the stamped documents that say, yes, indeed, I have moved everything. I've started paying everything under the new entity. But they come with like paperwork on a Friday to lock me up because there's a long weekend coming and they want some money to not lock up your compound. And they're there with like their chains and like their padlocks. It's quite a spectacle in many ways. And then it is again, you know, who can you call? Who can you surround yourself with? So in that case, I call my accountant, you know, all the paperwork is there and you can find a solution. I have to say that in my own situation, it is easier. I am not an importing company. I do not have to deal with the arbitrary rules of customs, but I'm just saying that corruption is something that you do not always have to give into. It can be easier sometimes to do that, but I always recommend that you can find strategies to avoid that. A smaller element is security. And the amount of time that I have clients telling me that they cannot come to Nigeria because it's so scary, or their wife says like, I don't want you to go there. And then instead they tell me they go to Johannesburg, which is like by all statistics, more unsafe than Lagos is. Security, yes, it's an issue, but I live in Lagos, a city of at least 20 million people. I came here alone, I drive around. It is not as scary as you would think. We have a very bad reputation, but like, let not security deter you from coming here. There's precautions you can take. Of course, even in Amsterdam, I'm from the Netherlands, there are certain areas where you shouldn't go to at night, but let security in itself not stop you from coming to Nigeria. The challenges, Ricard has alluded to them in some detail. One thing that I also wanted to point out is the changing policies. So for example, you're a company, you want to set up like a car assembly firm. The policy is changed so that nobody can import any cars. And then 2 years later, after you've invested millions in your factory, all of a sudden they say like, well, okay, no, let's reduce the import tariff on cars again. And, you know, like your competition is back online. So there are issues here. The doing business ranking is 131, but it is all about finding strategies around that. Like I said, I've been here doing business here for 15 years out of the 17 that I've been here. And it's not that I'm such a genius that I'm still alive and growing. I said it before, it is really who you surround yourself with, and it is the service providers around you. So you have to have a good tax consultant, a good accountant, a good lawyer, but also good staff. And yes, you can find incredibly good staff in Nigeria that are highly educated, sometimes from the best international universities. And they make life a lot easier for you. So the people that you have around you are keeping you safe and sane, I'd say almost. If you set up locally and you have a board, make sure that like the chairman of the board is somebody who can make a phone call, because a lot of the things that people ask you for money for, so the corruption bit, can also be solved through relationships and by calling in favors. You know, back and forth. And of course, that is the human way of doing business in many ways. Another thing is you are in business here in Nigeria if you are consistently providing the right quality and at the right price. Sounds simple, sounds like business all over the world. The consistency is the challenge here because you are in a very, you know, difficult environment. But if you can reach a level of consistency, you'll get there. And the right price. Nigeria is incredibly price sensitive. Of course, we just heard how the economy has made it more difficult for people to survive. A lot of people have low salaries. So you'll find that even companies that are very powerful, very rich, at the end of the day, they sell their products to the average population. So competitiveness, price is very important. At the moment, you see a bit of a shift from large A brands and large international companies to more Asian-leaning companies and definitely more, you know, companies providing the B or even the C brands. So it's all about that positioning. Another thing that you have to have is flexibility. You do not know what the next day is going to bring. That's part of the fun of doing business here, and part of the addiction, I'd say, of that keeps you in Nigeria. But you have to be flexible. You can't just set your eyes on one thing and think that is how I'm going to achieve it, and this is how. You'll have to reinvent the wheel at several times during the day, adapt to whatever the country throws at you or the government throws at you, different policies. The patience before something is done. And another strategy that a lot of successful people in Nigeria employ is diversification. So you have some interest in telecom, some interest in oil and gas, some interest in ICT and in agriculture, so that if one goes well, you can be happy. And if another one doesn't go well, it gets compensated by the areas that do go well. So if you bet on one horse in Nigeria, it can be very challenging if those policies change, or if a government official comes to lock you up for not paying taxes, then at least you have another entity to play with. And one thing I really want to say is, do not do what the Romans do in Nigeria. So do not fuel the fire of corruption. It is not necessary. It takes longer, it's more difficult, it's sometimes excruciating, but it is possible to be here without the corruption bit. It's the same as when you get to the airport, and for whoever has landed in the Lagos International Airport, it is quite chaotic. Chaos is deliberate, because again, then you can pay somebody to help you pass all the queues, etc. You get to officials who are asking you, like, what did you bring for me? For me, it's a bit of a hobby. In all my years, I've not paid 1 single cent. And just by having, a fun interaction, actually, it can be very annoying at times, but like, you do not have to pay people. I do know that some companies and people find it easier. It's faster if you do pay, but it is not always necessary. And the one thing that I want to tell people is, like, listen, if you don't even make an effort, you can't score. This is a quote from my countryman, Johan Cruyff. You've got to shoot, otherwise you can't score. And you have to come to Nigeria. It is, if you want to do business in a global environment, you cannot ignore Nigeria. You cannot ignore 1 out of 37 people in the world. So if you want to grow, this is, the next playing area for you to do business with. If you're exporting to Nigeria, the main thing is find a partner. So when you talk about who do you surround yourself with, critical for an exporting company is to have a local partner who understands how to navigate Nigeria, how to deal with the murky waters, how to interpret what is happening even on a policy level. That local partner is key. Now, a lot of people know how to sell themselves very well with a very fancy Rolex and a car. Maybe that the Rolex was fake and the car was borrowed. So do your due diligence and make sure that people or the companies that you're working with can deliver. And of course, if you do give them exclusivity, make sure that, like, you give them specific KPIs. A lot of people are afraid of fraudulent partners. Actually, the main challenge is if you have partners who cannot deliver. For example, you're registering a food product. The registration is for 5 years. You've paid the $10,000 that Ricard was mentioning. You've invested all that to get your product into the market, and then you have a partner without the network or the distribution network or even the financial capability to grow your business. It's not because they don't want to, but just because they don't have that capability, but you will have lost a couple of years trying to enter the market. So it is really working with the right partner. But you do have to understand that that partner then works in a challenging environment. So the partner needs support. And I know so many companies from, I don't know, for example, the Netherlands, who appoint a partner in Germany, and they go 3 times, 4 times a year, they go and visit a partner. And then they appoint a partner in Nigeria, and they sit in their chair and they wait until that partner delivers success. No, you have to give support to that partner. They are the key to your business. So, you can thrive here, but you do need to put money where your mouth is, really. Some other useful tips have been mentioned before. I mean, some things you cannot hedge against. Like, the fall of the Naira that we've seen in the last few months was unprecedented. No matter how many good people you have around you, no matter how much you've built up, if you buy a product for, $800, 800 Naira for the dollar, and 2 months later it's 1,600 Naira for the dollar, very difficult to hedge against that, and you will lose money in that case. But over time, some of the main tips are to work with those quality service providers, visit the market regularly, and then just position yourself, adjust your proposition, to Nigeria. So whatever works in Kenya or Ghana or South Africa may not work here. Work with local partners and visit Nigeria. So looking forward to welcoming you here. And asking companies whether they would commit to Nigeria, those that are already here, over 2/3 essentially say, yes, we would invest back in Nigeria in the next 1 or 2 years. So it's not as scary as you would think. There's opportunities everywhere. So I would encourage you to come and visit and do business. So that is the bit about doing business for me. And I'm gonna give it back to our host of the day.
Thank you very much, Tessa, for your very useful testimonial and numbers you share with us. Very promising. So now the floor goes to Inga Stefanovic and Antonia Yeke from the EU delegation in Nigeria. Inga is the head of section for green and digital economy, and Antonia is the lead program manager overseeing the health portfolio. So tying in with Global Gateway initiatives, they will provide an overview of projects they're pursuing and how they can create opportunities in Nigeria. So respectively on energy, digital and agri-food, and health for Anthony. So Inga, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric, and everybody on the other side of the digital space. Yes, I represent the team that deals with anything and everything between agriculture and digitalization. And here especially I was asked to talk about our work in the area of agriculture or climate smart agriculture, renewable energy, and digitalization. And these happen to be the first 3 sub-priorities of a bigger priority of the EU-Nigeria partnership, which is green and digital economy. So perhaps starting from agriculture or climate smart agriculture as we refer to it here, I think there's been a gradual change over time in the paradigm of how we approach the development of the agricultural sector. So as much as the traditional development assistance is still valid in the sense where resilience support, smallholders support is necessary, we try to look at the sector now as a sector with a potential for agriculture, for economic development, diversification, which is still a process in Nigeria, as you have heard, and the potential for the creation of jobs, especially for this big Nigerian youth population. So taking that approach and having that in mind, we are approaching the development of the sector through the development of the agricultural value chains. And here, our choice is to come sort of in the middle of the value chain and look for positive spillovers upstream and downstream, but especially, to take note of that smallholder structure of the Nigerian agriculture, to also look for those positive transformational effects in that smallholder space. But primarily our entry of support to the sector would be from the middle of the value chain. So working with all sorts of aggregators, processors, agricultural service providers. And in that way, sort of building up and empowering the entire value chain. So our support would be advisory, capacity building, business development, and food. And this is what we're also leading to provide for also access to facilitation of access to finance. The results that we are looking for are, improvements in quantity, quality, value addition, export potential. So all our activities that we have started, but now will be even doing more of, are going to be directed to that. Also looking for investors, and then putting at the disposal of those businesses, actions, and projects some dedicated financing facilities that could be direct investment lending. More and more, the European Union is also using the guarantees to mitigate the risks of investments. And you will see that there are already a number of European agribusinesses actually active here in Nigeria. So it's a space that can be still populated more with the EU business through investment here, but also there's potential for exports, improving exports as we work on quality and standards in the sector, going the other way. Currently, what we are looking at in terms of priorities, also keying in with the government priorities, it looks like we will be concentrating primarily on the agribusiness in dairy sector, and associated with that, possibly some crops that are food and feed, like soybeans or maize or sorghum. There's also horticulture. That is something that we've identified as has a potential for growth. And we are also looking at commodities such as cocoa, also in connection to the EU deforestation regulation, to also make sure that cocoa can be exported still to Europe in view of the changing legal framework on the European side. In terms of exchanges going both ways, we will also be launching shortly, and that can take place at the upcoming EU-Nigeria Business Forum, what we call the EU-Nigeria Agribusiness Platform. So virtual space that should help facilitate doing agribusiness between the Nigerian agribusinesses and European agribusinesses. So please stay tuned for further news on that. Now, let me move on quickly because the time is limited to renewable energy. So in renewable energy, in pretty much the same approach. So again, working with and through the private sector. In this case, solar mini grid developers, very much that has been the bulk of our work. And we support the emerging local developers, of which there are more and more. There are some external developers coming in. Sadly, we don't see much European business in this space. However, the market is emerging and starts gradually, taking space and volume. This is a way that we are very much promoting with Nigeria for electrification that is, clean and sustainable, and eventually over longer term cheaper than the diesel fuel or whatever it is that they're using, to fuel the generators. Now, in that space, there's also a number of services that we are delivering to the market in terms of capacity building and technical assistance, business development, but also grant support. This is the sector in which grants still play a role. And we are not the only grant donor in this space. We're even thinking, perhaps there's too much of it, but that's important to know. that this sector remains kind of still subsidized quite a bit. Then that notwithstanding, there's more and more also more commercially based financing solutions. I mentioned investment facilities in agriculture. We have a same for energy, renewable energy. We were calling them so far agrify and electrify, but now we actually sort of also came to the conclusion that it makes sense to have them in a more comprehensive investment strategy together. Sometimes these opportunities come from one end or the other and could be compatible and synergetic. Like, it can be coming in from the angle of renewable energy solution, but could eventually be also working with productive uses in agribusiness that this energy will be supplied for. And there could be a space opening for our investments from there. There are also in both sectors, and that we work with the development finance institutions to provide for on-lending facilities and to the local commercial banks to improve the lending space in those nascent sectors. And we have a new sort of boost now provided for that, because one thing is to provide more liquidity to the bank for on lending. The other is, the bank's risk strategy, and here we've been having problems. So now with the European Fund for Sustainable Development, EFSD or EFSD Plus, as it's more recently referred to, there will be more guarantees at the disposal coming from the European Union for those investments with development objectives. Okay, in terms of projects that could be of interest coming up, there will be a project specifically for health establishments where we'll be also subsidizing solar panels for health facilities. There will be also a project with the smaller developers for some, also in the solar sector. And the idea here is that we would organize bulk procurement. So maybe there could be some opportunities here to look out for in terms of procurement being announced. Our procuring party here that will handle that is going to be GIZ. And also we are now entering a small hydropower space. We'll be working on that with Nigeria in several instances across the country, supporting investment in small hydropower stations. And there we will also be organizing bulk procurement as our grant in-kind contribution from the European Union, and that is going to be handled by UNIDO, who is our partner in this undertaking. Let me just mention very quickly circular economy as linked to our work in the renewable energy sector, because I want to say that this is something that we are seeing so much interest growing and businesses emerging. And we've started already with one project when we are addressing circular economy in renewable energy, to already be looking at that aspect. And it's like a big market opening up, given developments in the renewable energy sector, but also when it comes to plastics recycling or anything recycling. And more questions that come to us in the delegation are related to how can you support and help and especially the investments in productive manufacturing from recycling or energy solutions. Okay, so maybe I'll move to digitalization now in the next few minutes. Now, I think an important message is, because maybe Nigeria hasn't been moving that far in that respect or so fast when it comes to infrastructural developments, though you may know when it comes to the skills and abilities and innovations and ingenuity of Nigerians when it comes to digital solutions and not only or various uses of digital solutions, there's no end to that. But when it comes to infrastructure, that could be a problem. But the government, so the government had this plan of rolling out 120,000 kilometers of fiber optic cables across the country, and they've in so many years, past years, they've only managed to do 30. So there's 90,000 that is now with this new government and the new Minister for Digital Economy is being accelerated. And we are just about to roll out a project and support working hand in hand with the ministry to attract and facilitate private sector investments in those fiber optic cables rollout. And here it's the way it's going to be done is going to be at arm's length solution with the government, independently managed vehicle to manage those investments and attract the private sector, which I think is an enormous opportunity also for the European businesses, potential investors and companies. Now, another opportunity that we're also looking at here with the government is the plan for comprehensive digital overhaul of all government services. And we are planning for a big support project in maybe under 25 budget. This is still in an early planning stage, but this is something we discussed with the Minister for Digital Economy, and this is a top priority also. So here also we are expecting, as we will be supporting, we are expecting, and this is what the Minister also is stressing, he very much is looking to the European models in terms of e-governance and in terms of e-solutions, especially from the Nordic states. So in terms of hardware, software, there could be in the future some interesting developments for the European players in this space. Now, in the meantime, we already have one big project being rolled out, the Digital Transformation Center. This is something we are doing co-funding with Germany and is implemented by GIZ, the German Development Agency. And this project is promoting innovation and digitalization in businesses and supporting it with concrete actions, are actually working on the entire ecosystem and with the regulatory authorities here in that space to provide for improvements in doing business in when it comes to also digital innovations. The project also supports specific digital innovations. So there are calls for pitchathons where actual businesses are identified and business enabling or digital solutions are identified. Possibly, you know, a good opportunity for investment from Europe as well. And yes, the local startups. Let me stop here. So that was a quick marathon on those three sectors and hand over to Anthony on health. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me very well?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here.
So my name is Anthony, Dr. Ayeke Anthony. I work at the EU delegation. I manage the health and nutrition portfolio. And I'm going to be limiting the scope of my discussion over the next 5 minutes or so to doing business in Nigeria from a health sector perspective. In my section, you also have the education and social protection, but I'll be limiting my discussion to the health sector. Just three concepts I want to just put out here, which will be helpful in the discussion. The first is flagships. This is a word or a buzzword you will hear from time to time, and it's simply what we do. So the flagships are simply what we do. From a global perspective, we have 4 flagships. The first one, our first flagship was the one to address COVID. You all heard about must have heard about the COVAX facility. The second is the manufacturing and access to vaccines and health technologies. The third flagship had to do with capacity for pandemic preparedness. And the fourth flagship was sexual reproductive health and rights. The second concept I would like to bring out here is the Team Europe initiative. And that is simply how we work. You could call it working better together. And in terms of modalities, we could operate through grants, procurement, contribution agreements, or blending, as mentioned by Inga. And there's a new instrument called now the Human Development Accelerator, which is focused purely on the private sector. And it's a measure of both the Commission and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other entities to provide guarantees for the private sector in different thematic areas that will strengthen the healthcare system, amongst others. The third concept I will quickly mention is the global gateway, and that's just simply how we communicate this strategy, the whole global strategy to everyone. Having said that, as a project manager, I have been in a position to see that there are challenges that come with opportunities within the global health landscape. And COVID-19 clearly demonstrated that. But if you do not see the opportunities in the challenge, then you miss the opportunity. So Nigeria, with its burgeoning population, some put it at over 2 million, 210 million and in counting. It's a growing economy, and it presents a unique and complex market for businesses that want to enter the health sector space. And from this perspective, I want to share some considerations that are very crucial if you want to enter this space. I will mention just 3. The first is healthcare infrastructure. And in terms of challenges, Nigeria has significant challenges, particularly in the rural areas when it comes to healthcare infrastructure. Traditionally, we've been involved in constructions of or renovations of health facility, cold stores, and the like. But the problems are beyond this. They include access to electricity, reliable water supply, even transport infrastructure. And all these impact on the delivery of quality healthcare. The opportunities when it comes to this area is that, one, the government is actively investing in improving healthcare infrastructure. In fact, one of the 4 priorities of the coordinating Minister of Health, His Excellency Professor Mohammed Pate, is medical industrialization. And so this now opens opportunities for businesses to partner in building new plants, hospitals, healthcare centers, clinics, diagnostic centers. These are all opportunities, as well as long as you focus on sustainable solutions that will address the unique needs of Nigeria. This is very crucial. From the EU perspective, one of the projects that we're looking at is the MAV Plus. MAV simply means manufacturing and access to vaccines and medical technologies. It has 6 work streams. I won't bore you with them, but from the Nigerian perspective, we'll be focusing on 3 of these work streams with a 360-degree approach that will look at the enabling environment, supply, and demand. So we'll be looking at industrial developments, including supply chain and the private sector. We'll be looking at research and development. We'll be looking at higher education and skills, trying to fill up the industry skill gaps that have been identified. Another example of some intervention in this area is the EIB support to a local pharmaceutical company here called the Enzo Pharmaceutical to build plants that will produce acute pharmaceutical ingredients for malaria drugs.
Anthony, sorry, if you can please wrap up as we run out of time.
Okay, so the next is access to quality. And under access to quality, the challenges for many Nigerians are largely in the rural areas and also shortage of skilled personnel. So opportunities will include the need to have innovative solutions, have platforms like telemedicine or mobile clinics. For us, we're looking at two major projects in this area that address sexual and reproductive health and rights. And these projects, one of them has already been launched, and the other one is about taking off. The third is the need to balance traditional and modern technology. And you will know that Nigeria's health space is a blend of traditional and modern technology, and it's important that you can balance this. Businesses that can do this, including the MAF Plus that will be focusing in some aspects on phytomedicine, will come into play here. And in summary, as I want to round up, some of these have been mentioned before, but if you're considering coming to work in the business area for health, you need to partner with the local stakeholders. That has been mentioned severally. This is crucial. You need to prioritize affordability, cost-effective solutions. You need to invest in training and education. We have the NCP program, National Contact Point program, that looks at greater access to Erasmus and Horizon Europe proposals. And then finally, you need to adapt to the local context and respect the cultural and professional sensibilities. There's a nuanced understanding around all of this, and I'm happy to answer questions that will be raised from there. Over.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thanks to Inga as well. Thomas, do we have questions on YouTube? Because I don't see any in the chat here.
No, we don't have any questions on YouTube either.
Okay. So I think our speakers were very comprehensive. Thanks a lot to all of them. We gathered a lot of interesting challenges, but also opportunities on the Nigeria market. And I see there are a lot of space for European companies to do business in Nigeria. So it's clear that it's not just a strategic market for collaboration for the EU and DG Grow, but also a country of great potential for our SMEs. Then I would invite you to look further to do business into the market. I would like to touch again on the upcoming EU Business Forum in Nigeria that is taking place on the 2nd of July. This is also an excellent platform for businesses to network and gain further insights into the Nigerian market. I would also invite you to keep an eye on the program of our Embracing Global Markets webinar series. We are frequently updating the program. We have the next webinar scheduled for next week on next Thursday, 20 June. It will be on doing business in the United States with a focus on the US life sciences ecosystem. Do please keep in touch with the EN for more updates and support, for instance, on internationalization. The network can support you in do business abroad. In this example with Nigeria, you could be put in contact with the delegation or the local business organization or the European business organization or the EN International Network Partner, if that is the case. So thanks once again to all our speakers. Thanks to Spiros, Ricard, Tessa, Inga, and Anthony, and to all of you for organizing and participating in this session. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao. Thank you.